everyone, my name is Owner and I'm a cybersecurity semester 4 student at the Fonts Hogeschool. In this video I'll be covering my prowess with the basic hacking steps and anatomy of a hack. So basic hacking steps, there's usually multiple categories involved when someone is going to pen test your website or whatever. One of these categories is called intelligence gathering, which I assume is pretty much the same thing as OSINT. There's footprinting, which is enumerating. There's vulnerability analysis, like that's depending on the results of your footprinting, you may perform a vulnerability analysis. The next step is exploitation, like depending on your analysis of the vulnerability, you may gain access to the system that you're trying to hack. Post-exploitation would gather all of the evidence that you found, and then the cleanup, you pretty much communicate with your customer, or do this during the post-exploitation as well. So let's take these things apart one by part. Intelligence gathering I understand as something that is pretty much done before you do any of the other steps. Intelligence gathering would allow you to gain access to, like let's say the streets and the home addresses of different IT admins, their telephone numbers, something like this. With intelligence gathering you would hopefully get a clear picture of your target as well. And footprinting, I've always understood something that pretty much means enumerating, like using nmap, using dbuster, using enum for Linux, something like this, in order to find out what vulnerabilities that your target may have. For example, with nmap I can find out which Linux kernel is being run by my target, or which Apache version is being run by my target. And this is very valuable information because in my vulnerability analysis I pretty much combine these previous two steps in order to find out if there's anything I could take advantage of in order to gain access to the system. And nmapping is a very popular example of footprinting. With this tool you can pretty much gain, you can view which ports are open, if there's any Samba share, if there's like a HTTP or HTTPS being hosted on the IP address, and this is very valuable information. So if you look at vulnerability analysis, you would pretty much combine the results of your enumeration, and you would do additional intelligence gathering in order to find out if the things that you found during your enumeration are vulnerable for exploitation or not. For example, using the example before, you may investigate which Apache version is being run on my website with a CVE website in order to see if there's any proven vulnerabilities on this website, and maybe there is. In the exploitation phase, which is following after the vulnerability analysis, a pen tester would gain access to the system that he's trying to target, and he would do this by combining all of the previous categories and seeing if the research that he did ended up working out. And this is a pretty dangerous phase because your client could be exposed to certain destructive testing in order to see if you manage to gain access or not. But the exploitation, it is very important for your client to know whether or not it's actually possible to gain access. You could do a more theoretical approach and explain to your customer how he's exploitable in these certain areas, but you haven't really tried to exploit these. And depending on the type of contract that you made with your client, this may be perfectly fine. So the post-exploitation, you would gather all of these results and you would bring them to your customer and be like, hey, there's like a few ports open on this and this server, and there's really an explanation for why that is the case. Maybe you may have to look into this, or maybe you did find an exploitation and you did manage to gain access. You would obviously explain to your customer how you managed to gain access and what he needs to do in order to fix this problem. So most pen tests, they have like a different method. It's like they have different names as well: white box, gray box, black box. White box, the pen tester would gain complete access to the source of the thing that he's trying to hack. For example, let's say you're trying to hack a website. During white box, the pen tester gains complete access to all of the sources of this page. DVH, which I've shown you on my previous page, does something similar to this, because it shows you the source of the PHP being run on the page, at the bottom right corner of the page, and this could be an example of a white box. So a gray box, the gray box is partial to no information. This usually, I think this usually means that the person that is going to do the gray box hack, he would, I imagine they would give him access to like one account. Like, here's one account you can log into, you can do anything with, or maybe it's like a low privilege account that he's gaining access to, or maybe it's like a part of the source code that he's gaining access to. So there's also the black box hack, and in this hack or pen test, the hacker gains no to minimal information. And I imagine most of the internet hacks, like most of the hacks today, being performed in a black box setting, because I imagine that most of the hacks done today are actually hacks done by the baddies instead of the goodies. Right. But what I'm going to talk about is the good guys among us, the ethical hackers. And before you can start performing an ethical pen test, you need to define goals. Like, what is the actual goal of the pen test? Is it to improve the baseline of the security? Is it to find out any old servers still being used in production that are vulnerable for certain threats or whatever? A goal needs to be made so that the entire project can be grouped around this goal. And in order to set this up properly, you actually also need a scope. Like, since you have a goal, like let's say we want to find out if there are any vulnerable websites still running in production, a scope needs to be defined as well. Like, are we also going to be attacking the network for this scope, or for this goal, I mean, or are we just trying to gain access to the HTTP or HTTPS? So after that, you also need to decide on the type of pen test that you want to perform. So like I said, the white box, the gray box, the black box. And then you perform the pen test, given that your customer agrees and you've signed a contract with confidentiality, of course. So after performing the pen test, the post-exploitation and the cleanup phase will pop up. And in this phase, like I've said, you report and deliver the results of your pen test. A fun anecdote I'd like to share as well about this is there's a story or like a citation told by I forgot his name, but it was a guest on the Darknet podcast by Jack Resider, and he said hacking is like breaking into a building in the middle of the night without the light turned on. Not only do you not know which way is which, the paths could be infinite, and you could be in the wrong room for a long time looking for clues that aren't there. And that's pretty much something that I recognize as well. So the reason behind why other people might hack, other than doing it commercially for a bank or for a client or whatever, is these things: hacktivism, crime, insider. I'm not really sure what this means. Espionage, terrorism, and warfare. These are recurring use cases for people hacking, I suppose. Which is also important when we look at the anatomy of a hack. Like, why is this person trying to gain access to the system? So there's a template for writing a penetration test report, which I thought I should highlight as well in this video. I was thinking about this, and if you do a pen test as a security researcher or whatever, and you have certain results, the client that you might be working for, maybe they're interested in having multiple companies involved in the cybersecurity, and maybe they have like a blue team and a red team. The red team finds out which vulnerabilities are there, and the blue team, they manage to like write a fix for it. So the reason why you might use a template is, let's say, using the example I've just given you, there's two companies involved. Standardizing the results of your test could be really useful for the other company. The code of ethics. So this code of ethics, they describe a few things that you and your clients should adhere to, and I pretty much agree with all of these. There's a Dutch white paper listed on the government website, and it says pen test. This is how you pen test, and it's a manual for the people who are requesting other people to pen test them. And I think this is a pretty interesting PDF as well, but it's in Dutch, so I won't go into it too much. Anyway, that was me for basic hacking. Until next time.